Now I'm going to apologize ahead of time for the noise in the background. I have my 3D printers running. Starting here, I have Davy Jones, and we're going to actually make him bigger. We're going to scale him up. We got him scaled up. Now we're going to start the slicing. So we take it down to whatever we think our slice is going to be, or what we want to make it, how big we want to make it. And we'll slice it. And we'll make as many slices as it takes and be able to scale it up after. So we'll slice them midsection. Here's another slice. And then we'll take it down. Make another slice. Like I said, the printer's running in the background. A lot of noise. There's his head. Remove all the parts. So we can actually fit them on the printer with no problem, one at a time. And the reason we do break them apart too is it also saves on a lot of supports, less supports. This one here I'm going to flip over, and then I'm going to cut the hat so that it's going to be less supports. You'll notice when I put the supports in, there's going to be a whole pile of them. More than I really want. So that's what it would be with the hat attached. Now you can print it like that, no problem. I'm going to tilt it back. And we're going to take another cut. We're actually going to remove the hat. And you can make as many cuts as you want to fit on the printer, but you got to remember the part numbers, what they look like, because it can play tricks on your mind, even cutting them. That's why I like to try to scale it before I cut them to the size I want, but it doesn't always work because then you got pieces off the screen. This is a lot easier to do it on the slicer than it is to do in a program like Blender. If you're an old guy like me, Blender will drive you crazy. Not that I don't enjoy it for smoothing out projects and stuff like that, but this makes my life easier. So then we got them cut, the hat's cut, and we're going to put that onto the platform. Underneath is blue because it's completely flush on the platform. That avoids any other supports that you don't need. Rule of thumb I always use is anything over 45 degrees. Sometimes I go 75 to use less. Usually get away with it. And we'll flip it back up, put it back together, show you how it's done. And we're going to put this guy all back together step by step to show you where we came from. There we go. All the cuts. You can cut between, straight down between his head. If you want to put real eyes in, you got to get in behind there. So you're going to have to put a cut behind his eyes. And here we go. Back, and then back to our original. Now this next one is a little more difficult, and we're going to make them bigger, scale them up. It's a big cave bear. So we're going to have to figure out the legs and the body and the head, because we want to make this, oh well, maybe not full size, but we can make him bigger than he is. And then we're going to cut him. Usually I try to cut in half first. So we'll make a cut right there. There. So we cut it, And then we're going to cut from the back and do our first section. So now we take the section. See? Mistake right there, right where the arrow is. That's what you don't want. You don't want that little piece. So we're going to do this again. Okay, here we go. We're going to do this cave bear again. So first of all, we're going to cut off the platform. That's what we should have did last time. The platform I definitely don't want on a larger model. So we're going to take it down, put it up, yeah, we'll cut it there. And we're going to delete that. So that's gone. Then we're going to set them down. We're going to flip them up so that he's easy to work with. So we can see where we have to cut. Make sure it's like within a 90 degree or close to it. And then we take her down. I don't know if you call that a cursor. I don't think so. Slicer. You slice them in half. Stick them on the grid. Now when we look on this, he should be flat right on the surface. And we're going to make a cut down there. So we have them completely in half. Now you're going to have to move them around so that we can get a perfect cut of the legs. Because if you take the legs off, it's easier to make the body without doing a lot of supports. Because you'd have to support that arm. Or that leg, or whatever you want to call it. The paw, all that. You can trim that down. That way it's a lot easier to print them separately. We'll move them aside. We'll bring in the back end. Back end's in. We're going to flip that over so it's actually sitting flush on the surface, because that actually means quite a bit when you're doing this, because if you don't have a flush surface, that means you're going to have to use supports and a raft. If you're not a person that uses a raft, which I do, the raft is what it sits on. It does a better, I think, a better function so that you can put the pieces together easier in case there is a bit of a slope. Then we move this stuff around. So now we're going to work on this leg. So we're going to take that down so that we can even put it this way. If you have a smaller machine and some bigger machines, you can run the bigger pieces on the bigger machines, and the smaller machines can run the smaller pieces, so you're not wasting any time and you get the project done a lot quicker if that's what you're doing. So we got a lot of cuts. We're going to organize them a bit to see what we got. And we put them all out. Now, depending on the size you want to make these, you can take the pieces individually, but you got to mark it down what your scale is, because if you make the head a different scale and the body, and it's going to frustrate you, and you got hours of printing and it doesn't line up. And usually what I do is print the head first, because then at least you got the head, you can do anything with it. But if you make the body last, you're kind of in trouble. So we put this up there and we decide, okay, we're going to do another cut. And we're going to move that aside. And stick this down onto the platform, under the bed, whatever you guys call it. Now we can make this any size we want. But rule of thumb is, if we're going to make this just a head mount, you got to make both pieces, I would say, at the same time, just to keep in your focus of the percentage of what you make it. Like if you can start at the very beginning and make the size you feel, but now if you cut them in half like this, you can put a little hole in the side and actually put the glass eyes in. And that's what I do. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, but I wasn't able to explain it on the actual picture. So then we're going to decide to put this all back together again like we did, so you know where it came from. But you're going to save all these pieces as STLs or whatever you feel that would work for you on whatever machine. I use the Flash Forge one here because it's easier. and we take them back down to size. Okay, so what we're going to do now is another different cave bear, standing one, but we're going to do a front mount, more of something that you can hang on the wall, but we're not going to make it as big as what we put up there. I'm just going to go to a certain point to give you an idea. So we're just going to cut behind the arms, and then we're going to get rid of the back end, and then we're going to place this on the flat. That way we got a 90-degree angle, and he's completely on the surface, so we get the good part of the, there you go, the good part of the mount. That way we're straight, and then when we make our cuts, they're going to be at proper angles. So first of all, I think what we'll do is, oh, this is scary, zooming in here, bringing them up to size, scaling them up. We want them a half decent size so we can work with. But like I said, if you're going to put this on the wall, it's going to be full size, so there's going to be a lot of cuts. So I think the first cut we'll do is probably cut the neck, the shoulder area. So we'll cut it, I guess, right about there. There we go. That separates two pieces. And then our next cut we'll do right down the center of the body. There's one and two. Okay, still on the blue means it's on the actual surface, which I've said before. And then obviously I'll say it again. Yeah, he's pretty scary looking. So we're going to twist him around. Now that red on the side means he's not fit. Well, see, now he's fitting in. So the red on the side meant he's not in the actual perimeter. So we'll divide that in half, which I said you can drill a hole in the flat side inside to put glass eyes in later on as you tape them in, and then epoxy the eyes in. So there's one. So if you want it that size, it'll fit on there. You can print that. And you probably can get away with that one, other than the teeth, without supports. Same with this piece, it fits in, no red on the edges. And there you go. Back in size. And removing one of the arms. And that's on an auto cut. That's not that's on an automatic where you'd like to cut it. That's a part of the program that you could decide exactly where you'd like to cut it. There you go. Two arms removed. And then we get into the nitty-gritty cutting down, make this thing fit on the printer better. And you can cut this down as much as you want, depending on the size of your printer. You're going to have to figure out what size you want. Now when I'm making this bigger right now, if you notice, the arms aren't with me. I'm just showing you this example. Now if I kept cutting like this and left the arms at the scale they're not going to fit. So I'm just kind of showing you how you can cut this thing apart. But you'd want to cut it apart before you actually do all your ratios. But I'm just kind of showing you the bits of how to cut, where to cut, and to avoid using a lot of supports. Because if you got the idea in your mind what can be printed, like the teeth right now, you're looking at the teeth, there's no way they could be printed on that angle. That'd be like printing the head in the middle of the air. You can't do that. So you'd want to cut this thing to the point where as less supports as possible. And that's not a very good cut right there. This one here, I'm going to go right through the middle of the nose and through the center of both teeth and remove that, so that when it comes time to glue it back together, I have both sides. And I could lay that on its side, and I'd use little supports to support the teeth, and most of it would be pretty well on a nice angle. And I could cut it there, I could cut there, move that there, probably cut another piece off of it. Depends upon how big of parts you want to print and how long you want to print them for. And you also got to remember, the more cuts you make, the more you got to glue, the more you got to fill and make them look like they haven't been cut. And that's a skill on its own. So just cutting them is the easy part. Gluing them together, sanding them to make them fit better the first time, other than using filler, is your best bet. But when you start, it's always not that easy. And there's techniques of putting the pieces together after, which you can use melting the seams together and sanding it, or hitting with a file. But there's what you got to do, and there's putting them back together the way he came. So I hope you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.